If you practice yoga or meditation and inspiration is rising like Kundalini and you feel like writing poetry, then my guest today is here to help you.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. Nice to see you again. Nice to be on here again.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm Melissa, and some of you may know me from my main yoga channel where I teach yin yoga and restorative yoga, hatha yoga, and yoga nidra. And I often feature poetry, and even occasionally I feature some of my own poems that I've written, which Dimitri helps me with quite a bit. And today, Dimitri is here to talk to us about writing poetry, especially for poets and meditators. But first, I know anybody who's landed on a video like this is already incredibly creative and inspired. So thank you for being here. And we'd love to have you as subscribers. So go ahead and subscribe to my channel and to Dimitri's channel. We'll put the links in below for Dimitri's channel and also for my main channel where I often include a lot of poetry in the classes. So Dimitri, why don't you, I know Dimitri practices yoga as well. He's got a pretty rockin' headstand, actually.
Thank you.
You're actually way more ambitious than me in your kind of acrobatic yoga.
Really? Well, it wasn't my fault. Like I was telling Melissa, the yoga group that I had, it was a group of 6th to 8th grade girls.
Oh,
and
yeah,
a lot of them are, and a lot of them are on the cheerleading team. So after meditation is done, after our session's done, the mats are still out. So everyone's like, let's do backflips. And I'm like, I'm not going to do a backflip. But they've been teaching me the bridge, and then they were teaching me how to do the headstand, which was scary. It was so scary.
Yeah, especially in school settings because it's like concrete floors.
Yes.
It's not even like nice
concrete
floors or wood floors. You're gonna hurt yourself big time.
Yeah. And then I took a spill a couple of times, but they're very encouraging.
Be careful.
Yeah. They're very
That's how people hurt themselves.
Definitely.
Learning from 6th graders.
Well, she was an 8th grader, so she at least taught me the 3 phases before I got up there. So,
yeah.
She taught me the prone position, and then with my legs up, and then standing. But still,
it's good. I mean, I used back in the day. I used to teach middle schoolers and high schoolers, and you got to keep them engaged, right? Because otherwise,
Geez, the hardest part always, and that's why I started doing it just right in the beginning. We did like a 10-minute meditation. And man, like I would be there and I would just be trying to stay in my zone with my eyes up. And the first couple of classes I would get like bunny ears behind me. There was steps around me. Kids were sitting next to me, like laughing and then going away. It was interesting. But by maybe the 15th session, everyone was kind of like they were kind of
putting in your hands.
It was little by little. Exactly. Yeah, it's a process. It's a
totally.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Have you ever had like a situation where you've been doing yoga or meditation and then inspiration has hit you and you're like, oh man, I gotta write that down. That'd make a great poem or a line in a poem.
Yeah, I definitely try to sit with that thought and have it carry along, which is kind of hard because then you have like other passing thoughts and you have to like kind of choose what you're gonna keep and then what you're gonna like disperse away. And sometimes I lose it. I know I recommend to all of like my poetry students and my Patreon folks that listen, if you have a line, you need to get to that line before you lose it in the ether forever. But it's easier said than done. And I think you have to pick and choose what you decide to meditate on. There's times where you need to be focusing on the self, and there's times where you need to be focusing on that subconscious on the page. So there also needs to be a separation, because if not, poetry or just kind of the cyclical thinking about the self will drive you mad. If you choose to just think about one thing too much. Like we said before, it's like a balance. Everything's balance.
Yeah, because then you can sit down to meditate and just be sitting there and waiting for the muse to arrive.
Right. And then you're not in the moment at that point.
Right.
You know, you're always waiting for that next moment.
Right. That can become its own kind of ambition, which would be, yeah, not very good either.
And then I mean, how natural is it at that point for you to be coming up? How organic is the thought process, and how organic is the experience if it's something that you're kind of trying to onset instead of something that happens naturally? My best lines and my best thought ideas are ones that just come out of the blue.
Yeah, yeah, it seems rather kind of aggressive the other way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes my best ones are when I don't know. I don't want to say when they are because they come at all different times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, sometimes if you, for lack of a better term, attack a poem aggressively, sometimes if that's what the purpose of that poem is, that's good also. You're right. There's a time and place for everything. Every poem kind of has its own life force. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So since we are talking about yoga and meditation, and do you feel like that there is a place for that for writers?
Definitely, definitely. I always well first when I'm talking about like beginner writers, or when poets are starting out wanting to either make it a profession, or they see that it's something that they're good at, but then they have kind of this placeholder for what a poet represents or what a poet is. I try to let them know that a poet can be basically anything. A poet can basically be anyone. Um, a lot of what I write about my own story, my own life, but I also embellish things. I fictionalize things. So I usually have this ratio. I call it the 60-40. Now, I still have to work on it because it's not technically a 60-40, because sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's like 70-30, but you always have to have a balance, or kind of the ratio of something that is fictitious and fact, right? You could have 20% of that poem be fiction, and then you rely on your conscious and your experience for the other percentage of it. You could have a poem that starts out 100% realistic and it feels too close, or
Mm,
the experience is all too real, and it just kind of feels like a journal entry. So you're like, okay, how
mm,
can I change this? How can I put a turn in? How can I put myself in a different setting, or put my speaker in a different setting,
mhm.
and change that up? So when you are beginning to write, know that you are
You know
putting
who I
down your
feel does that
thoughts.
really well?
Does he? Say
You
that
know
again.
who I feel like does that really well?
Who?
Susan Musgrave. Have you read any of her poems yet?
I've probably read a poem or two, because, like I said in our other discussion, as soon
Yeah.
as you tell me something, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good, and then I start looking it up, trying trying to
Yeah.
see who you're looking up. Yeah.
Whenever I read her poems, I think, okay, I can tell this is about your life, but I really just cannot tell how much of this is
Right.
true.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people start reaching for that, and
Yeah.
I try to tell them, like, that's not really what it's
Yeah. I
about,
like to
you
be
know?
entertained by that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool if you go searching, but I can see that it becomes also an unhealthy vice when people are thinking about their own work or other people's work and saying, "Oh yeah, this is them. This is definitely them, 100% of the way," and you start trying to trace back to what White Castle they were at when the situation happened, and the point is not to try to prove the narrative true. The point is to be immersed in that narrative, immersed in that journey, to share that
Mhm.
journey with someone else, or even if you're just writing for yourself, to share that journey with yourself.
Mhm.
Because I know when I write a lot of my poems, and when I've known other folks to write their poems, it takes them to places that they didn't even know existed yet, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people say writing themselves into a box. Well,
Mm.
you write yourself into space and time,
Mhm.
and you find where you fit in this it's kind of like the way the idea of how space is always growing, right? like
Right.
like
Which
like
is
the
like,
universe.
I feel like that's what the whole meditative journey is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like when my teacher talks about it all the time, he's always talking about letting go of our ideas, thoughts, and beliefs about things. And so it seems to me
Mm,
like if we're in the process of writing a poem that's going to be really good, we're letting go uh, in a way of our ideas, thoughts, and beliefs about things, and opening up
mm,
into something much bigger, maybe more exciting, more interesting than what was
right.
actually happening, right?
Hmm.
That's
And the other
that's the
thing,
creative process.
Yes, and the other thing to also notice, which the other thing you're going to notice when I'm talking or any other poet talks, everything a poet says is a paradox, right? Everything we say is true and it is also false. So
Mm.
the same thing that we're saying, everything is ever expansive and we can't really reach whatever that thing is because we're constantly chasing it. We are also, much like meditation and much like the process of yoga, we are everything that is around us anyway. Right. We are the clothes we wear. We are that clock on the wall. We are the floor. We are the windows. We are the chair. Right.
Well, and we're
Um,
always trying to pin it down to the smallest detail in the same
yeah.
way in meditation that you're continually bringing the mind back to the point of meditation, whether that be the breath or, whatever the focus of meditation is in that particular meditation, right? It's kind of a similar thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when I'm also thinking, and you challenged me with what are other good kind of sorry, like so like what else can you? All right, hold on. Let me collect myself. I know. So we were talking about what you can actually do with a poem in meditation, right? Like how you can actually
Yeah.
have poems
how
in
how
meditation.
poem could be
Mm,
how poetry could actually be a meditative process in and of itself, because yeah, I actually love doing that. I'm curious how you do it. That'd be interesting.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, what I've been doing with you and all the other patrons doing these exercises, right? When I was sitting down and I was thinking of how I could structure this class, right? How can I structure this 52-week class? I was trying to think of the process. I usually write poems, and I write poems in a couple of ways, which are going to be spoilers because these are going to come up throughout the year. I either read a poem and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, it would be really cool if I could remake this poem in my own inflection. We've had this conversation
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
And instead of talking about this side of the wall, talk about this side of the wall and see what
Mhm.
happens.
Mhm.
I also say sometimes I'm talking, I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be a great idea for a poem? And that's how another poem comes out. Sometimes you hear a funny phrase and you're like, there's a poem in there somewhere. Like I put an Instagram photo up today, and there was a bar called the Players Club that closed down. There was graffiti on the front, and then there was a for sale realty sign there. There was a factory behind it, but then there was a rainbow behind that, right?
Mhm.
So there's a poem in there somewhere. And I get
Oh,
these moments
yeah,
as a
yeah.
poet. Yeah,
Mhm.
I get these moments as a poet all over the place where I just look at something and I'm like, oh man, there's a Hubba Bubba wrapper on the floor,
Mhm.
but it's next to a pencil. There's a poem there,
Mhm.
and that's the thing about poets where we just have this poetic eye. We're always seeing different things,
Yeah.
and
See, I think that's totally like shamatha vipassana, right? Where the
uh-huh.
poet goes, where you just take that moment where you go in, like, there's the Hubba Bubba wrapper and the pencil on the floor. There's my object of attention. And I'm going to take that moment and I'm going to focus on it. And then I'm going to open it right up for the reader,
Right,
right?
right.
That's the vipassana. That's the view. That's the clear
Mhm.
seeing, right?
Exactly.
So no wonder if you meditate, you write poetry, right? Because it's like you're
Yeah.
trained that way. You're trained to see, to place your attention on an object of attention, and then to have that clear seeing.
Mm, mm. And that reminds me of a poem, and I know that we're getting closer to that time. I
Yeah.
don't want to I don't want to babble too much, but I do want to get to a poem that kind of talks about those poetic moments, right?
Mhm.
Or a poem that kind of talks about the persona. So a persona poem is when you take the character of something else. You become that inanimate object. You become that other individual. Or
Mhm.
you become that thought process. So everyone sees it wherever you are. There are cleaners that are working there. And they're usually the ninjas of the institution, right? They come unseen with the mop or their broom or their rag, and they just make sure everything's really clean. So I got another poem from Poetry Like Bread, also from the anthology.
You're making
Um,
everybody crazy for that anthology that's out of print.
I
That's
want
not fair,
to.
Dimitri.
I want to. It exists. It exists. You can still
Okay.
get it. If not, you can DM me or message me, and I could PDF you some of these poems, or I could give you access to the poems. And this one's by Martin Espada, so this is by the actual editor. And this poem is called "Jorge, the Church Janitor, Finally Quits." And there's an epigraph that annotates Cambridge, Massachusetts, 1989. No one asks me where I am from. I must be from the country of janitors.
Hmm.
I have always mopped this floor. Honduras, you are a squatter's camp outside the city of their understanding. No one can speak my name. I host the fiesta of the bathroom, stirring the toilet like a punch bowl. My Spanish music of my name is lost when the guests complain about toilet paper.
Mm.
What they say must be true. I am smart, but I have a bad attitude. No one knows that I quit tonight. Maybe the mop will push on without me.
Oh my God,
So
that's heart-wrenching.
I know, and you know the greatest thing about a poem is when it's heart-wrenching, but
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't take you to that point where we are able to be revealed to the trauma that the speaker is feeling. We have a sense of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
but we are left to our own devices so we
Mm-hmm.
can experience the trauma ourselves. And bringing it back to just the beginning of this conversation, when we're talking about Kundalini and we're talking about that energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just the energy and that tingling sensation you get when you read a poem.
Mm-hmm.
Know that when you're writing a poem, you don't have to talk about the trauma with the capital T. You could
Mm-hmm.
talk about that you could just talk about that moment
Mm-hmm.
that gives you that sense of that energy, that tingling in your spine, that feeling in your face. And I think those are the things as readers and as writers we really look for in poems.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 'cause there's those universal connections because we can. I think like in a poem like that, everybody can relate to those moments of not being seen and appreciated.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, my heart's so tender from that. Oh my gosh.
That's Martin Espada.
Oh, okay. Thank you everybody for listening and watching today and joining Dimitri and I. If you made it to the end, give it a thumbs up and put in the comments, my heart is so tender. Yeah. And be sure to go over to Dimitri's channel and subscribe there because Dimitri has amazing YouTube videos teaching you how to write poetry. Like, honestly, you're getting an MFA education on YouTube. And if you want to go deeper, then, well, I haven't taken an MFA, but you know what?
She said it, not me.
Okay, but honestly, I have a lot of university education.
Uh-huh.
And you are offering some great education online.
That
And
makes me so happy. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate that comment.
And also you can go deeper with his Patreon community. I mean, seriously, for the price of Netflix, like, I mean, you and I gifted myself that for my birthday this year, and it's been like the best gift ever. So.
And it's not even the price of Netflix anymore. Netflix just raised their prices.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think I'm the price of Hulu now. I don't know.
Yeah. So such a bargain when you look at the cost of university education or even just taking a course. Like, so we need to support our online educators because they are giving so much for such a little price tag. So, and what that means is that we need a lot of people behind them to support them. So please support people. If you're a writer, please support people like Dimitri. Because the value that he gives is incredible. Okay.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope it was great.
Yes, I so enjoyed it. Oh my gosh, just the poems alone. Okay, thanks
Amazing.
everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.